Hi, everybody. This is Janet Belsky, and I'm about to begin my lifespan lecture series. This is going to be part one, growing up. And now we're into episode one, that marvelous time called infancy. Okay, just setting out the territory. How long does infancy last? Well, psychologists put it from 0 to 2.5. The reason being that 2.5 is when we fully become our own person. And that's something we'll be talking about in this lecture. But infancy in itself is divided into stages. We have early infancy, which we're going to talk about next. We have the time when the baby wakes up to the world. We have a thing called attachment happening before age 1. We'll get there. And I'm going to tell you about wonderful new things. First year of life, babies know a lot more than we give them credit for. And finally, we're going to talk about the time when you begin to walk to the time you really start talking. And that's called that marvelous age called toddlerhood. Early infancy, first 3 months of life. We're going to call that the pre-cortex phase. That's because babies come out of the womb basically without the top part of their brain. And so what happens is they really can't, cortex causes all of our voluntary activities, but they don't come online fully for the first 3 months. And unfortunately, all we have are these automatic activities called reflexes. So your baby is born and you expected this kind of a guy, and you ended up getting this kind of a guy. Really an unformed, almost should be in the womb, let's be honest, kind of person. So reflexes are the driver of early infancy, and it just isn't as gorgeous as you expected it to be. It's all on automatic pilot. Major reflex is sucking. You didn't know how to suck, you had to learn that, you'd be dead within the first couple of hours. Eating is our major reflex. And we find that babies do a thing called sucking all the time. Sucking is what they're going to get their food from, obviously. So here you see this baby just going, that happens even when the breast isn't near. Newborns are sucking machines. Under the principle that babies should still be in the womb, what quiets a very young baby? And we all know that. First thing that's going to quiet the baby is satisfying that sucking reflex. And that's why pacifiers are a parent's best friend. We used to give them to our son, and we used to call it plugging him up, because you put the pacifier in, he'd stop crying. Then it would fall out, and then he'd start crying again. Pacifiers are very important, and they're fine in early infancy. For a while, what the hell, you know. Okay, so here's another thing. This is like being in the womb, isn't it? It's called swaddling. Womb is very tight, moving the baby, getting the baby in a tight environment. Also, what else would you do? Well, for those of us who had kids do this automatically. Rock the baby, once again, mimicking the womb. And finally, if you can do it, carry the baby in a baby sling. That eating is important, and so is sleeping. Newborns, I'm not telling you anything you didn't know. Sleep, well, I am telling you, so they end up sleeping about 18 hours a day when they're born. But as we know, their sleep cycle is not like ours. It's like 3 hours, wake up, get fed, go back to sleep, go back to sleep. When are you going to get the baby to first sleep through the night? That's a big issue for new parents, because by the time you've been up every 3 hours, you really feel jet lagged in the most extreme way. So when do you think babies first sleep through the night? Think for a minute. Is it at 2 months of age? Is it at 5 months of age? Is it at 1 year of age, or is it never? Okay, well, the ballpark figure for babies giving you a good night's sleep, your first one, is about 4 to 5 months of age. That's the time when you can expect to get your first good night's sleep on the average. But the reality is babies never sleep through the night. And what you have to do, hate to use that word, but you have to get them on a schedule where they wake up and go back to sleep. Now, last night I woke up 3 times, but I put myself back to sleep. Sometimes a little harder, but that's what you want to ideally get the baby to do, be able to wake up and put them back to sleep. Very much related to that is this whole idea, should you sleep with the child, have the child in your bed? So if you look at this little guy right here, he's crying. And you want to pick him up and put him in your bed, don't you? In every nation except America and Northern Europe, the idea that you would not sleep in bed with a child, and often it's until, when we would consider pretty late, maybe 4, 5, 6, 7, is seen as the right thing to do. It would be seen as child abuse to put the baby separately, because the idea there is having a nurturing person in bed with you, and we know this, don't we, throughout our lives, is going to make us sleep better, and it's going to make us feel loved. Okay, so is it good to sleep with the child? The answer, it's completely up to you. Want to sleep with the kid? Go for it. You don't want to sleep with the kid, you feel uncomfortable about it, that's okay too, as long as you give them a lot of love. It's up to you, with this qualification. There is a thing called SIDS that I'm sure many of you have heard about, where in very vulnerable babies, about a 1 in 2,000 chance, you put them face down and they will suffocate in the covers. So pediatricians recommend having the baby sleep on their back, which is going to be a little bit harder if you're actually exactly sleeping in the same bed sometimes. We're done with the first 3 months and the baby is waking up and thrilled about the world. And what happens at the beginning? We called this in our house going to the movies. The visual system, as you might imagine, comes on first because they can't do anything else. So they're like, oh my God, look at how exciting the world is. That's why we have these things called mobiles, quiet, maybe a 3-month-old, 4-month-old baby. What the most important thing is something that is moving, something that has a lot of contrast, something that's loud, speaking. It's a face. So babies are programmed to look at faces. And that starts out almost from the time they completely wake up to the world. Look at this eyeball here. It's contrasts and lots of colors. And so you'll see the minute they're waking up, they are looking at you like you are the most interesting thing in the world. And you might say to yourself, this baby understands me the way nobody else does. And not only that, it's going to smile, which is really going to connect me. We love babies because we feel that they're connected to us really in a different way. We love babies, and that's important. Babies are set up to have us love them. Moving into the world is a baby agenda. And the first thing that happens is once they begin to be able to touch, they're going to reach out for their toes. So here's a toe touching little baby, probably about 3 months of age. Can naturally having things in your mouth, that's how they're finding out about things, is very important. The only thing I can do is touch my feet, but that's so important to me to be able to do that. Here's a baby of about 6 months of age, and he can actually reach out to the wider world. And can you just imagine what that feels like to touch that pine cone? It's almost like you went on the most exciting trip in the world. So now we're going to go to our major guru in our field, a man named Jean Piaget, who was Swiss. Piaget wanted to get into the heads of children, and he was able to do that beautifully. And what he said is, babies are little scientists, and our mission, almost like a scientist, is to pin down what reality looks like. And that's what we're doing in the first year of life, but it's at age 1, it's pinning down the properties of the physical world. So here we have a little scientist behavior at 1. I'm throwing everything around, I'm messing everything up, and I am thrilled about it. And this is a thing that Piaget had a fancy term for it, which I'm not going to tell you. It's called, actually, I will, it's called circular reactions. They do things again and again and again and again. And if you have a 1-year-old or an 8-month-old, they're going to want to do everything about 50 million times. A beautiful way of putting it is, it's like they're doing experiments where you have to repeat them and repeat them and repeat them to know that that's the way the world works. In fact, touching and throwing is how babies reason about the world. You have about an 8-month, you think about 8 months old, maybe 7-month-old baby, and he's looking at that thing, he's touching it. How does it taste? How does it feel? I'm going to throw it against there and it made a noise. That's interesting. And of course, these toys that make noises are very important. I'm looking at it again. How does it look? Touching it again, throwing it again. Now I'm going to throw it down. By the way, this is an important milestone. When you throw something, Piaget said, and you know that it exists when it isn't there, it's like you learned a lot. Yeah. But I figured that out and I'm not interested anymore. So I'm going to go to something really interesting. And let me see if I can feel that thing. And mommy's telling me, go back to the toy. Be good. But I want that thing. And mommy is still saying, be good. Basic parenting agenda for your life starts out at age 6 months when the baby gets moving and the parent says, "That's dangerous, be good." Big clash there with parenting goes on probably till, I'm doing it with my son, until the end of his life or the middle of his life and the end of my life. And then they get their wheels. And when the baby starts moving, you are really in trouble as a parent because you got to keep that baby safe. And it gets very dangerous. You got to watch that baby every minute. That's why we have playpens, almost like putting them in jail, or we have baby gates and that stuff. But there's something that will help you out that's even more important. Love. And in psychology, we use the fancy word attachment. The love response is keeping us close to our loved ones, and that is happening at every stage of life. So the guy who developed all these ideas is a real guru in our field named John Bowlby. He was an ethologist and he studied animals. And he noticed that every species, here at geese, has a time when the little babies have to be close physically to the mother. I think in geese, the attachment zone is like one day. But in our species, it happens at a specific time. Attachment is our glue. So you have attachment in preschool. I love my best friend. You have attachment in adulthood. That's the model for adult romance. I love my partner. And of course, you have attachment in old age. I want to take care of the person I love. That's our basic mode. And by the way, if you're in the hospital, who are you going to call at any age? You're going to call your loved person. Our attachment response is evoked when we're in trouble at any age. Here's a model for our attachment response, really at 4, 5, 6 months of age. It's called the dance of attachment. And the baby and the caregiver, usually it's the mother, are completely in tune and they just love each other. And I'd like you to think, when you were separated from your loved one or your partner, what did it feel like when you got back together again? You probably did the dance of attachment with each other. 8 months. I'm a psychologist. When my son started to cry when I left the room, I said to myself, hooray, the attachment response is kicking in. That lasts, well, you have to have your caregiver physically close from 8 months to about age 2.5, when we're into toddlerhood, and then it kind of disappears. We can be alone for some time without our caregiver. And it's just when babies are beginning to crawl around. So that's when it has to kick in. And so separation is a problem, and being picked up by a stranger, that's called stranger anxiety, is a problem. Anybody new picks the baby up and they're going to get, they may be okay if they're in the caregiver's arms, but you've all seen that. Somebody else picks the baby up and they go crazy. So for grandparents, it's kind of depressing if you haven't seen your grandchild for maybe 3 months and you go see your grandchild and all of a sudden they don't want to see you anymore. That's the normal attachment response that's kicking in. Here we've got snapshots during the landmark attachment zone. So one of the things that babies do is they explore. They're happy to do that, but they're always checking back. Mommy, is this okay? They're looking for you for guidance. Am I doing this right? Should I be exploring this? Here's an example of being sent to daycare. First day of daycare. Pity the poor caregivers. They get crazy until they get attached to the daycare provider, which you can do. But the most important thing in terms of the attachment response is how do you feel when your caregiver comes back in the room? And you should feel like it's the most wonderful thing on earth. The person I love more than anything has come back, and the person that they love, which is the caregiver, feels this is a peak experience in my life. And by the way, the same thing is true with a romantic partner. Seeing the love of your life and how they feel about you is a peak experience in human living. If you don't have that reunion response when you're in the attachment zone, are you going to be in trouble later on? Now, the classic idea of Bowlby, and of course it goes back to Freud, is that if you don't get the right kind of love from your, quote, mother, could be your mother, more likely to be your mother, early in life, you are not going to be able to really love as an adult. So here we have a kid who just didn't really care. Parent came back. Is this kid going to be set up for an insecure, this is called insecure attachment, when they get older? And the answer is, this is true of many things in psychology, it's very complicated. First issue, you can teach somebody, it's a no-brainer, to be securely attached. It may take longer, even if they were insecurely attached at age 1. And we have lots of studies of kids who are adopted when they're older, where they are able to develop a secure attachment. So it's not a death sentence. And even if you didn't have a lot of love when you were little, are you able to love as an adult? The answer, of course you are. Human beings are malleable in the area of attachment, which is critical. Furthermore, everybody always blamed the mother for an insecure attachment. 1-year-olds, some of them really are insecurely attached, may be very anxious, may not care. Some of that absolutely has nothing to do with the mother. It's the temperament of the child. Some children do the attachment thing just fine, and other kids, temperamentally, it's harder for them to attach in the right way. So mother blaming is not, I feel, is not warranted. Moving right along, the research shows us that babies know a lot more before age 1 than we ever gave them credit for. So here is the classic, lovely study, and beautifully done by infancy researchers. Okay, now remember, around 6 months you can reach. That's an important fact you should know in your head. They show a 6-month-old, a lovely, sweet puppet being nice to another puppet on a video. It's a video. And then the next screen, they have a very angry puppet. And the idea here is, are people going to be, are they going to want to be with the nice puppet or the angry puppet? And the answer is, these little people here will preferentially reach for the nice puppet, showing that we know being mean is bad. Okay, this one isn't so good. Remember, I just talked about the attachment response. Well, it looks like under age 1, babies will prefer people that look like them, or people in their own attachment category. So for instance, this little baby is more likely to look at a video of this guy and not want to look at a video of this guy, generalizing The roots of racism are built in. We want to be with our own kind, starting very, very early in life. We like people that look like us. Now, here comes a good thing. Toddlers love to be loving. They love to give and they love to care. And here's an example of something that starts out very early. And this little boy is going to want to be nice. Nobody taught him that. To that little animal. Be nice. You don't have to teach somebody to be nice. Caring is built into our genome too, and that's a very good thing. Now we're turning to toddlerhood. Toddlerhood, I'm going to call the landmark age of becoming your own person. You're walking and you're running around, but you're not quite fully getting into language. We love them because the attachment response is very, very strong in us. But they're also messing up the house and they are totally infuriating because they're always doing stuff we don't want them to do. But it's more than that. Toddlers actually, according to another one of our gurus, Eric Erickson, said toddlers need to say no, and he called that autonomy. And what he really meant is you're first developing your sense of being your own separate person. So if you see toddlers, you'll try to get them dressed and they'll run away from you. They want to know you're still there, of course. But, you know, toddlers love to run away from their parents. But that's normal because that means he's becoming a separate person. Moving right along, we're almost at the end to language, which is the end of toddlerhood. That's when you really connect with the human world. Okay, but moving to baby talk. The thing that happens when the baby first is getting to language is people will naturally do a thing called baby talk. Very long words, very exaggerated. See somebody talk, this is guy's probably about 7 months age. We talk in baby talk to babies. Is it good at the beginning? And the answer to that is, as stupid as it looks, that kind of speech helps babies learn about words, helps them learn to articulate different words. So baby talk is actually good for teaching early language. Next question, when do children really begin to speak? And the answer is not when they say their first words, which usually happens at 1, but when they start to combine words, 2-word sentences, which happens around 1.5 to 2 normally. We typically a little closer to 1.5. Combining words is the beginning of the activation of what we call the language acquisition device. Language has come in from the brain and there's an explosion of language, and that's when speaking really begins. Everybody has their own timetable, and we know this. Some babies talk very early and other babies really might not talk till late. Okay, so with a lot of exceptions, we are prone to say she's been talking early. Usually it's a she, interestingly. She's very smart. Is there any reality to saying that? And the answer is, at least in terms of doing well in school, there is. Early talkers tend to be early readers, and they tend to be set up to do better in school, which is the main place where you have to do well when you're a child, when you're in childhood. Wrapping things up. As I've been mentioning, attachment and separation are the themes of life. We want to be close, we want to love, that's basic throughout our whole lives. And we also want to be our own person. Isn't this a lovely picture? So for instance, my partner is in the next room and I want to be close to him, absolutely. But I don't want to be in the same room as him. And certainly it would be terrible if I just agreed with him. No, these are the competing impulses of being human. We want to be separate people and we want to be loving people. Infancy, you get everything we want to know about human beings in those first 1.5, 2 years of life. Everything is there. But if you guys want to know about human life, I'd like you to join me at www.belskybeinghuman, and I have decided to devote the end of my to telling you everything I know, because I've been writing textbooks in developmental psychology for almost 50 years by now. So this is part of the growing up sequence. And we're talking about growing old, what happens when we age. I'm going to talk about big questions, intelligence, personality. Join me for my series of 15 at the moment lectures on human living. And I'm going to say goodbye. On to childhood. Next episode.